My name is Hillary Ade, and I am a children's librarian at the Daniel Boone Regional Library. And I would like to welcome you today to our presentation by Rebecca Ebers. She is a board-certified behavior analyst with BPI, and she is going to talk about building and using social stories to explain difficult situations to our kiddos. If you have any questions, since we're in webinar, you'll want to put the questions in the chat and we'll make sure she sees them. And I'm going to just pass it right back to you, Rebecca.
Sounds great. Wonderful. Thanks for the introduction, Hillary. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here for everyone. Give that a minute to load. All right, wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. As Hillary mentioned, today I'm going to be presenting on social stories. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to use social stories to explain change to children or difficult situations. The information that we have today is geared toward individuals ages 18 months to 5 years. However, this material can really be helpful for children of all ages. As Hillary mentioned, my name is Rebecca Ebers. I am a board-certified behavior analyst and a licensed behavior analyst for Behavioral Perspectives in Missouri. All right, well, we'll just kind of start diving into it. So I have outlined 3 objectives for today's presentation. The first one is to define and provide examples of social stories. The second being identify applications and use of these social stories with children specifically. And then third, I want to have you guys have the ability to take this away to create and find your own social stories. All right, so let's begin by just discussing where social stories originated and what they are. Social stories were originally created in 1991 by Carol Gray while she was working as a special education teacher with children with autism spectrum disorder. Social stories are categorized as social learning tools, and they're used to support the safe and meaningful exchange of information between parents, professionals, and people with specifically autism, but children of all ages. They're really unique from other stories in that they are personalized to the individual. This might including individualized text, pictures, or illustrations. And then they're also unique in that they are written in the view of the child or the individual. So rather than saying, Sally does this, the social stories use words like I, me, and us. All right, so a few more notes about social stories and what kind of sets them apart from your typical children's book or story. Firstly, they work to present information very concretely. The example to the right of this screen demonstrates this by using very concise sentence structure and language. One example I can pull there is, if they say no, it's okay. It's a very clear way of saying, if someone says no to something, that's okay. How to explain it very clearly, concisely, and concretely. As I mentioned earlier, these are really individualized stories as well. So if I'm creating this social story that's displayed on the screen that we just referenced, I might also, individualize and include pictures of them playing with a specific child. I might include, items that we might find in the natural play environment. The picture there describes a jungle set. It looks like a seesaw. I might actually use, equipment that I have in my home or at school that my child might actually interact with to make it a little more individualized. And then I might also individualize the language based on the language that I use with my child. So if I say, you can ask a friend to play, and that's what I use in my, everyday language with my child, I might also include it in my social story just to kind of have that continuity or, that flow of language from that natural environment to that social story. And then, social stories are really meant to increase the structure around a situation, a scenario, or a topic by telling the child exactly what to expect in those situations and how to act. This also helps to decrease potential anxiety and stress in those situations as well, which is a really good thing to have. So social stories accurately describe a context, a skill or achievement, or even a broad concept according to these 10 defining criteria that Carol Gray set. So we won't go through all of them, but I'll point out some of what I believe to be the most important criterion that set apart social stories from any other tool. So the first one is that it shares that meaningful social information or goal, right? You want to create a serious, specific goal and have everything catered around that specific goal. I think that number 3 is also very important in that it answers those specific WH questions. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those are in a little bit. Number 4, it says, like we mentioned before, it's written in that first person perspective. I do this and it's okay for me to do this. And then finally, number 9, it may contain that individually tailored illustrations that enhance that meaning of that text, right? So we chatted a little bit earlier on the last slide about the example that we can elevate that by individually including pictures or examples from that natural environment that are more applicable to our children. All right, so social stories can benefit a variety of children, like we mentioned, as they were specifically created for work with children with autism spectrum disorder or ASD. They can be applied to children with other developmental delays, behavioral or emotional disorders, language impairments, and comprehension difficulties. But as I mentioned, they are a really great tool for all children, typically developing children, or, even I think there's been some success with adults as well. But as you'll see, a lot of these examples, as we kind of go through them, are really geared more towards children. All right. So, trying to get my slides up here. Okay, so social stories can be useful in explaining a new or difficult situation. Some examples that I have here are a friend moving away, parents getting a divorce, or dealing with a death or an illness. They can be used in preparing for a change, moving to a new house or a city, a new school, a new teacher. And then they have also proven to be useful in explaining advanced concepts such as discovery of self or others, puberty, stereotypes, and resilience. When introducing social stories to a child, we should plan to kind of do some of the following. So first and foremost, we want to review that social story with a child at least one time per day when first introducing a new topic, situation, or skill. This allows for a frequent review of the material. I really like to review this story right before the situation in order to allow the child to practice those skills right away. It's fresh in their mind. They can practice after reading it. And then, when we are introducing it, we always want to be able to track progress. So I like to have parents or teachers or whoever might be implementing a social story have a plan for how to track that progress. This really could be something as simple as taking 2 to 3 minutes after the situation occurs or after that practice situation in order to reflect on how your child handled that situation or that target scenario. Maybe having a piece of paper where that's where you check in and you write down, hey, little Timmy did an awesome job doing this. He did this in this situation, or, maybe this didn't work as well today. Let's come up with a plan for tomorrow. And then as you'll see there, if you aren't seeing that desired responding or that desired behavior, make a change, right? If something's not working, let's change something else. And you'll see, on the next slide, we'll go over a few strategies that we can use to kind of amplify the effectiveness of those social stories. And then, on the contrary, if progress is evident, make a plan to fade out the social story. We don't want our child to have to be, dependent on a social story in every single situation. So maybe we start to review every other day or even once a week. Another idea is to remove a few important words from the social story and require your child to fill them in with you when you review the story. This can be a really good way to enhance their involvement, making sure that you're kind of checking in of, do you remember what you're supposed to say, or do you remember what you're supposed to do in this situation? Having them, kind of tell that back to you is a really great way to kind of elevate to that next level. And then finally, avoid introducing multiple social stories at once. It can be really tempting to create social stories for every situation after we see how effective they can be. But we really want to ensure that the child is making progress with one story before introducing another. Otherwise, it can get really confusing and a little bit overwhelming as well. All right, so social stories, how can we use them? So much of the work involved with social stories is in the creation of them. So implementation of the strategy is really easy. All you have to do is read the story, right? However, as I mentioned, we do have a few tools and strategies that can be used alongside the social stories in order to amplify their effectiveness. These strategies include using a role play opportunity with the story. So rather than reading the story and having your child practice in the natural environment, creating an opportunity maybe with you or with a sibling to contrive that in a little role play fun. The next strategy would be, if the child is able, having them read the social story, right? So as I mentioned, these social stories are written in that first person perspective. And so if your child is reading it, they are saying all of these things in that first person perspective. I can do this. In this situation, I do this. It's a great way to kind of have that kind of connection of, rather than mom reading it to me, if I have that ability, that again just enhances this effectiveness a little bit more. Another strategy that I really like to use is including a checklist or an additional visual. As we mentioned, there are visuals that can be included in that individualization of the social stories, but maybe something as simple as a checklist of the things that we do in this situation that your child can tick off as they find themselves in that situation can be really effective as well. The last one, again, using pictures rather than words for those individuals who cannot yet read. If I have a 3-year-old who can't read, but I really want to use a social story, I can use pictures that can help kind of send that message rather than those words to help kind of amplify that meaning for them as well. All right, so the next few slides are going to demonstrate a few different examples of some social stories. These are some ones, there's kind of a mixture of ones that I've created myself and some that I've found on the internet as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about those pre-made internet found social stories near the end of today's presentation. All right, so this social story relates to a very common topic that, is something that we used social stories to explain to a lot of the children that I've worked with, the pandemic that we're currently in, COVID-19. It addresses and explains why a child can't go to school during this time. I think this story does a really great job of including those relevant behaviors. It says that there are ways that we can stay connected. We can use our phones, we can video chat, et cetera, et cetera. They also give an action item of wash your hands. So they do a great job of telling the child what to do in that situation. And then it also does a great job of supporting that language throughout with the use of pictures. Why can't I go to school? There's a picture of school there. I know by looking at this exactly what we're going to be talking about. This next set of examples, these demonstrate kind of those differences that we see when social stories are individualized to the child's age, reading level, and comprehension as well. Social stories can be used to explain those very broad concepts. For example, the social story to the right relates to resilience, explaining what resilience is. And it does so by relating to things, a 10, 11, 12-year-old might know things like, they're learning in science about plants and animals, all that good stuff. versus the one to the left, you'll see is catered to a little bit younger audience, talking about going back to school after summer vacation. Again, those short, concrete ideas alongside those pictures that help kind of tie everything together. All right, so now that we know a little bit more about what social stories are and how we can use them, let's talk a little bit more about how to create these for your child. All right, so when talking to others about social stories, there is a line of thinking that only experienced professionals can create social stories. Well, it's really untrue, right? Anyone can create a social story as long as we follow a few guidelines. And we'll kind of go over those guidelines in depth today so that you have those abilities and those resources by the end of today's presentation to create one for your own situation that you might find your child in, or you just want a little extra support in. And then, of course, if after watching this presentation, you're still feeling unsure about creating a social story of your own, feel free to reach out to an experienced BCBA or consult these online resources that I'll have at the end for you as well, for some extra support. So when creating a social story, we need to first consider that purpose. What is the goal? What do we want to teach the child in this situation? An example that we'll kind of walk through together is going to be related to kind of the purpose of the presentation, right? So explaining to my child that we're moving to a new city, explaining a difficult situation or a new change. So I had a family reach out to me with this, asking, saying, our family is relocating they were going off to just St. Louis, which isn't too far, but still a big move for a little kiddo. And she just kind of mentioned that he's having a really hard time understanding what that means and how it's really going to affect him. So we're going to use this as an example and create one together today. All right, so now that we know kind of what that goal is, we have to think about what the child needs to understand in order to achieve that goal. We need to really collect that pertinent information. Asking ourselves, a few questions. Where does the situation occur? Who is present in that situation? How long does it last? How does it begin? How does it end? What is happening in that situation currently? And how should the child act in that situation? So as this relates to our example, the situation would typically, I'm assuming, occur between, the old house or the house that they're living in now, and then that new house that we're moving to. The situation might include the child, a mother, a father, maybe some siblings, or any other people that are in the immediate home environment. I know that moving is going to include packing up our stuff, maybe saying goodbye to some family and friends, and it might end with unpacking and meeting a whole lot of new people, right? There's a lot of nuance that comes with moving. And then finally, I want the child in this example to demonstrate flexibility, to help with some packing of their toys or clothes, and then meet a few new friends as well, which would just be a cherry on top. All right, so after we've kind of gathered that information, of course, we have talked throughout the entire presentation the importance of individualizing the social story. And so, now is when we kind of take that information and then really cater it to our own kiddo. So the content and presentation of the social story should be appropriate for the child's age level and level of understanding as well. Using appropriate photographs, picture symbols, drawings with text in order to help those who might have difficulty reading or with younger children, or really just, make it more concrete. If you are writing this for someone, in this case, it's not my child, so I might need to gather more information about that child, maybe their age, their interests, their attention span, their level of understanding, and then also incorporate those into the story. Maybe this kiddo loves to go swimming and there's a swimming pool in this new area or near the new house. Maybe having that as something to look forward to and telling them in that social story is a great way to set them up for success and let them know what to expect. The text should really incorporate gentle and supportive language and then answer all of those important questions that we mentioned before, such as who, where, when, what, how, and why. One other note about the language and the text involved in the stories, Carol Gray, the founder of social stories, states that creators of social stories should include as many of the following elements as possible in order to truly create an effective social story. When first beginning, this can seem very daunting. There are a lot of different types of sentences here. And as much as I loved, writing and English, this is still daunting to me. So I really challenge you to try to include one, maybe two of these sentence structures in your social story, and then incorporate more as you become more familiar with them. So a few of these sentence structures include, first at the top there is a descriptive sentence. This is really describing what's happening. Details are really emphasized here, making it recognizable and easier for your child to understand and relate to the situation as it occurs. The directive sentence includes instructions or directions on how your child should appropriately respond to a situation. A perspective sentence should describe a possible reaction or a response or a feeling that child might have in that situation. An affirmative sentence states a common value or opinion. Here you can emphasize important points or goals or rules or laws that are related to the concept or the skill you're trying to teach. There is cooperative sentences. This describes the actions of possible help of the other people around based on the situation. So if there's other family members involved or friends or peers involved, how do they relate to this situation? The control sentence, this states actions or responses created by your child. Really, it helps in, helping the child remember the strategies that work for him or her. And then finally, this is, my favorite partial or my favorite sentence structure, which is the partial sentence. This is really the idea of helping encourage your child to either make a guess or help come up with different ways to present things or different ways to respond, really getting some active involvement. So these are typically represented by kind of a fill in the blank in the story. So an example that I found here was, I will feel blank when I get my ice cream. How do you feel when you get ice cream? Well, I feel excited. So, having them come up with kind of that expressive language to fill in those blanks. All right, so we have identified our goal, we have gathered the necessary information, and then we'll work in this slide to individualize our text and our information to the child based on our example. So let's put it all together. This is a brief example of what a social story based on that example might look like. I noted the different types of sentence structures to the left of each sentence as well. That way you can kind of get an example as you go through it. You can always refer back to this as well. So of course we want a catching title. So I said moving, if your kiddo is super into cars or traffic signs or something like that, you could, say, the road trip to St. Louis or whatever it might be, to kind of bring in that individualization and make it really catchy and fun. So the first sentence says, I am moving somewhere new. So that's that descriptive sentence telling them what is happening, what, who, when, why. We didn't have a lot of information here. So again, individualize it as necessary. The next sentence, my family and I pack all of our clothes and toys into boxes. We say goodbye to our friends and tell them we will visit soon. A directive sentence in telling the kiddo what to do. We are going to pack all of our clothes and all of our toys into boxes, and we're going to say goodbye to our friends. Those are the action items that we have. And then also note that we are using that first person language. My family, I pack, I am moving. The next sentence is a perspective sentence. It can be really sad saying goodbye to my friends, bringing in that emotion of, yes, you're going to find yourself in this situation, and one of those feelings that you might have is sadness. The next one is an affirmative sentence. When I am sad, it's okay to cry. I can give my friends a hug and say goodbye. So with this one, I tied in a little bit of, rhyming to make it a little catchy. Again, this is something that I want my child to be able to remember in that situation. Like when I am sad, it's okay to cry. I can give my friends a hug and say goodbye. It's catchy. It might be easier for them to remember. And then the last sentence structure is partial. I will make more friends and that want to play, offering some of that fill in the blank. Maybe they say, they come up with different ways to fill in this blank, play basketball or play at the park, or I will make more friends that want to sing with me, whatever it might be that your child might be interested in. And this is also a really cool way to challenge your kiddo. Maybe come up with 3 things that can go in that fill in the blank, and really kind of get them thinking about it as well. So due to limited space, I didn't really include individualized pictures, but remember, this is always a welcome idea. Maybe including a picture of the new house and some friends that we'll be saying goodbye to would be helpful here as well. These are a few examples of what a finished product might look like. So there are several options for the mode in which you present your social stories. The first at the top left there is, printed and laminated in a book fashion. Off to the right is a different way. It's a 1-page kind of printout that makes it a little bit easier for viewing. And then there are even printable options. And I found on the internet some video social stories as well. So lots of different ways based on whatever's going to work best for you and your kiddo. All right, so I understand that sometimes it's just not feasible or it can be a little intimidating to create your own social stories. So thankfully there are lots of free to little cost resources for social stories online. You just have to start searching. So when searching for social stories, you just first start off by choosing your search engine, whatever you guys use. Is it Google, Safari, Firefox? And then kind of identifying some keyword searches from there. I've had a lot of success with just searching social stories for children. If you don't have a broad goal in mind, maybe you're just kind of toying around with the idea. Maybe you find one online, you think, maybe I can, use this as our first adventure and then, try another one. You can also search for a specific story based on the scenario or the skill or the goal that you're wanting to teach. Like I mentioned, there are social story videos as well. I searched social story videos and there are lots of options out there. And then finally, you can also search for further examples and resources for creating your own. One point to mention is that some of these pre-made social stories require payment, as I said, usually anywhere from, $1 to $5. But again, if you decide to use a pre-made social story, remember to try to individualize it as much as possible if you're able. All right, and I also wanted to point out a few additional resources, as well as, feel free to search for your own, but these are a few that when making my presentation, it really stuck out with me. The first is Carol Gray's social story screening instrument. It's basically a checklist of, what constitutes a social story versus what constitutes just a regular story that you're telling your child. The next one is something that I've had lots of requests for are, tips for social stories on, dealing with death and illness. This resource does a really great job of giving an example as well as, talking parents through how do I have this difficult conversation with my child. The next one is Carol Gray's social stories platform online. She talks about what social stories are, a little bit more history about it, and then there are some free available social stories on her website as well. I found a good website. It's an ABA website that I've used before, and they just have a pretty large collection of some pre-made social stories as well. And you'll find that link. I believe what we've done in the past is we put all of these links in the recording down below, and so you should have access to that. And then if you're at all interested, we have where I created a PDF of a social stories kind of template that can be available as well. And that's what I have for you guys today. If you are interested in chatting any more about social stories as they relate to challenging or difficult situations or changes or any sort of topic, feel free to reach out. I have my contact information there, as well as if anyone's interested in receiving kind of that PDF of the social stories template, I'm more than happy to share as well.